In the middle of a harsh desert, there is nothing but rock and scorching wind. The sun burns away every hope of survival. Yet Israel achieved something that made the entire world stop in its tracks. They built a colossal water machine, powerful enough to bend the laws of nature, pull water across lifeless land, and turn blazing sand into a thriving agricultural heartland, something not even the most water-rich nations had ever done. But the most astonishing part was how they did it. A system so technically sophisticated that many experts called it the mechanical miracle of the 21st century. Where did this secret lie, and how could humans replace entire rivers with technology? Join us as massive minds uncover the machine that rewrote the destiny of a desert nation. In the harsh Middle East, Israel faced a brutal truth. It had no major rivers, no natural lakes, and rainfall was so scarce that it lasted only a few weeks each year. 60% of the country was a burning desert. In the early 1950s, when the government had barely stabilized, Israel encountered a painful paradox. The population was growing fast, but the water supply was almost non-existent. The south was completely dry. The north had water, but it couldn't be transported. The terrain was fractured, the soil was salty, and the elevation shifted constantly. So Israel made a decision that was both brutal and brilliantly accurate. Carve a national water corridor more than 130 kilometers long from the Sea of Galilee down to the Negev. They didn't do it because they were ready. They did it because waiting meant national collapse. Israel's first challenge wasn't finding water, it was creating a path for the water to travel. The Negev wasn't just a desert, it was a living, shifting creature. The sand moved with the seasons. The terrain broke into jagged layers. Salt-soaked soil threatened to crack concrete within a few years. Nothing in nature was stable enough to host a national canal. So where do you even begin? Israel's answer was simple, yet uncompromising. Begin by understanding the desert down to its very core. Before a single shovel struck the ground, a series of large-scale survey campaigns was launched. High-resolution satellite imagery was used to read every fracture in the terrain. Ground-penetrating radar scanned through layers of sand and rock. Seasonal wind directions and intensities were measured to identify wind corridors, where sandstorms could bury an entire construction site overnight. Survey teams camped for months deep inside the Negev, drilling hundreds of boreholes dozens of meters deep to uncover the hidden geological structure below. Every single meter of the canal route was marked, measured, and recorded with near absolute precision, because even the slightest deviation could mean the water would never flow at all. Once the route was fixed, the next challenge truly began, turning the desert into a buildable foundation. Hundreds of bulldozers were deployed to level sand dunes, shave down high ridges, and redistribute sand into low-lying areas, creating a more balanced surface. But leveling alone was not enough. Sand, no matter how flat, is still sand loose, unstable, and incapable of supporting the weight of heavy machinery. To solve this, Israeli engineers were forced to train the desert sand itself. Controlled amounts of groundwater were sprayed onto the surface, allowing the sand particles to bind together into a denser layer. Then, heavy rollers repeatedly compacted this layer, forcing air out and transforming what was once a collapsing surface into a foundation strong enough to carry cranes, excavators, and trucks. A foundation was created not from concrete or steel, but from sand and water, two elements that seem fundamentally opposed in the desert. With the ground stabilized, excavation began. This became one of the largest earth-moving operations Israel had ever undertaken. Every day, roughly 70,000 tons of sand and soil were moved along a construction corridor stretching nearly 400 kilometers. The canal was shaped with a U-shaped cross-section, approximately 45 meters wide at the base and averaging 7 meters deep enough to allow water to flow steadily without pumps. But the most critical factor was the gradient. The longitudinal slope of the entire canal had to be controlled within an extremely tight margin of error, because even a slight excess or deficiency would cause the water to either tear apart the canal banks or stand still, unable to move. Laser instruments were used to constantly verify elevation, with adjustments made every few dozen meters, keeping the entire canal aligned like a perfectly straight line carved across the desert. Yet even after the canal was fully excavated, the desert still refused to surrender. Negev sand has a dangerous thirst. It can absorb and drain water within hours if not properly sealed. That made waterproofing a life-or-death step. The canal bed was first lined with fine sand to create a uniform surface, then covered with concrete slabs 10 to 12 centimeters thick. Between the slabs, expansion joints were sealed with hot asphalt, allowing thermal movement without cracking. In areas with weak subsoil, an HDPE geotechnical membrane was placed beneath the concrete to ensure water could not escape into the ground. Alongside the main canal, hundreds of supporting structures were built. Reinforced concrete bridges for roads and railways crossing the canal, drainage culverts to keep natural water flows unobstructed, and aqueducts spanning streams and ravines. Every 10 to 15 kilometers, water distribution gates were installed, preparing for the day when the first flow of water could be controlled and regulated. When Phase 1 ended, Israel had no miracle. But it had achieved something far more important. It opened a path for water to exist inside the desert. It laid both the physical and intellectual foundation for the entire water machine that would follow. From this point on, water no longer depended solely on nature. It began to depend on engineering. And from this concrete corridor, Israel stepped into its next, even greater challenge, not just carrying water across the desert, but forcing it to move against the very gravity of the earth itself. But the moment water reached the Negev, a harsh truth emerged: open canals weren't enough. The desert heat was so intense that water evaporated before it arrived. Israel had to attempt something even American engineers at the time called insane: push water underground and force it uphill along mountain slopes. But how? The Sea of Galilee sits at 213 meters below sea level. The nation's main water source was literally at the bottom of the terrain. To transport it, Israel had to overcome a 365-meter elevation gap, the equivalent of pumping water up a 100-story building. Thus, the pressure artery was born. Massive PCCP pipes nearly 3 meters wide, so large a Ford F-150 could drive through, were buried underground. Every pipe segment was a promise. Either it works perfectly, or the entire system collapses. But pipes alone weren't enough. Israel needed a heart. Inside the mountainside, they blasted rock and carved out the Sapir pumping station, one of the most gravity-defying engineering works of its era. 3 massive vertical shaft pumps roared to life, lifting the nation's lifeblood upward. That sound wasn't just machinery. It was the sound of a country pulling itself upward meter by meter. Water surged upward. Pressure was controlled. The 365-meter climb was conquered, a feat the world could only watch in disbelief. But just as Israel defeated gravity, a new threat crept in: a century-level drought that slowly drained the Sea of Galilee. Without water to pump, all engineering triumphs would collapse into nothing. Israel's answer shocked the world: if nature no longer provides fresh water, we will make it ourselves. They chose an option that sounded insane, yet was utterly logical: drink seawater. The Mediterranean is not just salty, it is corrosive, full of microorganisms, and packed with impurities that could destroy national pipelines. Desalination technology at the time was primitive, expensive, and unreliable. They began by drilling a 1.5-mile intake pipe deep into the sea, far from turbid coastal water. But the real challenge started once the seawater entered the RO system. To separate salt, water had to be compressed to over 1,000 pounds per square inches, comparable to a multi-story building pressing down on the size of a palm. Only the strongest materials on Earth could withstand such force. Then Israel installed 50,000 polymer membranes, each with microscopic pores thousands of times smaller than a human hair. As seawater was forced through this nearly invisible barrier, salt and impurities stayed behind. Pure water emerged on the other side. The Sorek plant, designed as a strategic national asset, came online as Israel's filtration powerhouse. What stunned the world wasn't just its scale or technology, but its cost. Only $0.58 per cubic meter of fresh water, a global benchmark no other plant could match. At that moment, Israel officially freed itself from the weather. A Sorek engineer put it simply: we don't wait for rain anymore. We make water. Desalination didn't just save the system, it rewrote the global concept of water, from a scarce natural resource into a manufactured product. Within years, 85% of Israel's household water came from the sea, forcing arid nations like the U.S. and Australia to rethink their water future. But once cities had water, a new challenge emerged. What should Israel do with millions of cubic meters of wastewater every single day? Instead of treating wastewater as a burden, Israel treated it as a second tier of resources. Urban wastewater, after biological treatment, wasn't discharged. It was fed into the natural sand dunes of the Negev. Over 6-12 months, the water slowly filtered through layers of desert sand, removing bacteria, impurities, and restoring natural mineral balance. No artificial membrane in the world could replicate this filtration. What emerged wasn't wastewater. It was high-quality agricultural water. Thanks to the Shafdan treatment plant, Israel now recycles over 90% of its wastewater, more than any nation on Earth. And more importantly, Israel's water cycle finally closed. Sea to technology to people, to rebirth to back to the fields. Now Israel had water to drink and water to grow, setting the stage for the final transformation, turning water into harvest. With regenerated water ready, Israel returned to the center of its story, the Negev Desert. This was where decades of digging, piping, desalinating, and recycling had to prove their worth. They built the Purple Line, a dedicated pipeline carrying reclaimed water from Shafdan straight to southern farms. But water alone wasn't enough. Precision mattered. That's why Israel deployed its signature innovation, drip irrigation. Every drop landed exactly where it was needed, exactly when it was needed. No waste, no loss, no dependence on rainfall. In a land where rain couldn't sustain even a single season, every drop was a technical decision. And the result? A scene that once sounded impossible, but is entirely real. The desert has bloomed. Lush green farms now cover soil that once cracked under 45 degrees Celsius heat, growing tomatoes, peppers, melons, grapes, and staples once thought impossible. The Negev, once called the land of death, is now an agricultural exporter for a nation that once didn't even have a river. And when Israel began selling water to its neighbors, its story reached a new meaning. From a nation searching for water, to a nation producing water, to a nation exporting water. When we look back at Israel's 60-year journey, the true marvel isn't the concrete bridges, steel pipelines, or seawater desalination plants. The real marvel is the mindset behind them. Israel didn't simply solve water scarcity. They redefined what water is in the modern world. While many nations still view water as a gift of nature, Israel chose to see it as an industrial product, something that can be created, purified, reborn, and distributed like electricity or data. This shift in perspective freed them from the climate trap that still restrains much of the world. That's why Israel's system isn't just infrastructure, it's a survival blueprint for the 21st century. While the Colorado River dries year by year, while the Rhine shrinks, while the Mekong and Nile struggle to divide dwindling flows, Israel stands in a land with no rivers, no lakes, no climatic blessings, and proves a truth the world must now face. Scarcity is not destiny. Scarcity is a signal to rethink. And when thinking changes, the impossible becomes inevitable. Israel's water machine carries a message far beyond its borders. It forces every major economy to confront a simple question. If a desert nation can make water from salty seas, turn wastewater into crops, and even sell water to its neighbors, then what excuse do resource-rich nations have in the face of climate change? Were you surprised by this water machine that transformed an entire nation? If you were, let me know. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.